had it happen to you where someone did something so charitable and so generous for you that you left that gift and situation walking away from that thinking, wow, why did they do something so nice for me? I can't believe they were so generous. What in the world did I do to deserve that sort of kindness? Maybe there was a time in your life where you were kind of financially down and out, and you went to your mailbox and you opened it up and you found a card in it that had a $250 gift card to the grocery store. And you think, wow, that came at exactly the right time, thank you. Maybe you lost your job, and so maybe you were picking up some shifts, waiting tables. Maybe you were working Shipt or driving Uber, and someone left you 100% tip, not just the normal 10, 15, 20 that people usually leave. How does it make you feel when people are that generous with you? How does it make you feel when people show that kind of charity to you? Well, I think it gives you a pretty high opinion of the giver, right? And it also kind of makes you think, boy, I got such a great gift that I really want to share it with someone else because I know I didn't deserve it, so now maybe I can bless someone else with the gifts that have been given to me. Today we continue our sermon series, that idea that everyone needs some good news. And as much as over the last couple of weeks we've learned about how the way that we share good news is being close to the source of good news, Jesus Christ, and being compassionate as Jesus was compassionate to us, today all the words that we've heard meet the action. Today all the words that we learned play themselves out as works in the world. Today we learn how everybody needs to hear good news from charitable Christians, and everyone needs good news from a charitable church. Now, that gospel lesson that I read to you, that parable of the sheep and the goats, I think if I were to ask any of you what that parable is about, I think the first thing that you would say is, well, that's the judgment scene, Pastor. That's the scene where Jesus sends believers to heaven and unbelievers to hell. And you would be right, that is part of the parable. But by the end of the parable, God is giving his disciples even more than that. He's telling his disciples very clearly what they need to do to prepare people for that day so that they can see the charity and generosity of Jesus and end up in heaven. But friends, before we get into kind of the nuts and bolts of the parable, I want you to think of these verses that Jesus told his disciples at other points in his ministry. You might remember Jesus saying to his disciples these words, "Freely you have received, so now freely you give." You might recall on that Thursday evening, before Jesus was betrayed, before he died on the cross, he washes the disciples' feet, and what does he say? "As I have loved you, so now you must love one another." See, this is the crux of Jesus' entire ministry, the pivot point that everything that Jesus was teaching his disciples works upon. Jesus shares, yes, earthly blessings, but he shares forgiveness, mercy, and charity through love. And his disciples, in turn, share that with the world. But before he prepares his disciples to do that type of charitable sharing with the world, he makes sure to remind them once again what the greatest charity, what the greatest gift of all was. Matthew 25. "Then the king," that is Jesus, "will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world.'" What an amazing gift, right? A gift that they didn't deserve. Imagine for a moment all people who have ever lived. How many people are in the world today? Some 8 billion people, right? But not just them. Every person who has ever lived and died over the course of history stands in front of Jesus' judgment seat. And by rights, what should Jesus say? By rights, he should say, "I'm here to separate the sheep from the goats. And the wages of sin is death. And my Father says, be holy because I am holy. And so ain't nobody going to be on the heaven side. Everybody's going to be going to hell." By rights, that's what he should have said. But he doesn't. Instead, he says to the believers, "Come and enjoy the inheritance prepared for you that you did not deserve, that was prepared before time began, heaven for you." What a gift, right? And then, after sharing with the disciples what that undeserved mercy was, after giving them that charity, after giving them heaven, Now he goes and tells his disciples how they're going to share that gift with others. I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty. You gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. And the disciples stand in front of Jesus, and the believers stand there, and they scratch their heads, and they say, well, we didn't do that, Jesus. You were born 2,000 years before some of us. We never visited you in jail. We never gave you clothes. We never gave you water or food or anything. How can you say we did this? Jesus tells them, I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me. So when believers share gospel-motivated charity connected to the gospel, not charity for charity's sake, but charity that points to Jesus, they're not doing it to get a pat on the back. They're not doing it to look prideful in their community, but instead they're doing it because when they share that, they're sharing really the charity that Jesus gave to them first, so that other people, through their generosity, through their love and charity, could see the charity that Jesus gave when he promised that inheritance of heaven. Friends, I got a little bit of a story to tell you about today. About 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I received a message on the church's Google Plus account. It makes me feel really old because I don't even think Google Plus is a thing anymore. But I received a message on the church's Google Plus account, and it was a woman, and she wrote me a whole bunch of different things, but I'm going to highlight one of them because it has to do with what we're talking about today. The woman wrote me, and essentially what she said was, what good has the organizational church in America done for people anyway? What good has it done for people? There's homeless people all over the place, people that don't have money to pay their bills, people that don't have clean water in the world. What has the church done about those things? If you tell me that the church is important, why hasn't it taken care of those problems? Now, I could have a debate with this lady, as you could too. We could probably say, well, no, the church did take care of some of those things. But let's just for a second let her comment sit there. And let's just ask the question, right or wrong, why did this person think the way she did? Why did she have those feelings about the church as an organization in the United States? I have another story to tell you. A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I sent some of our council members an article. It was a news article from Kalamazoo, Michigan, and it was about this Baptist church in Michigan, Kalamazoo, that had paid off $2.5 million worth of debt during the pandemic. A great feat, right? And the point of the article was to say that, wow, look at what they're going to be able to do now that all their debt is gone. That's amazing. Then I made the mistake of going to the comment section below. If you ever want to make yourself really frustrated, angry, or depressed, read the comment section on below of any article. You'll feel great. Sarcasm. In the bottom of the comment section, there was a guy that wrote, sarcastically, great! Now that they paid off their debt, they can pay their staff more and build an even better castle for that pastor. Wonderful! Instead of taking care of the community around them. Now, we could debate that person, and we could probably provide some arguments to say that, no, that church did take care of their community. I'm sure they did. But let's just leave his comments sit there. And let's ask the question, why did this man comment the way that he did? Why was that his opinion regarding the organizational church? I did a little preparation for our sermon today. I searched out a couple things on Google. I wanted to see what were the most searched news terms in 2020 on Google. Number one, of course, was coronavirus. Number 3 was stimulus check payments. Want to know what number 4 was? Unemployment benefits. Now, we could all debate whether stimulus is good or bad and how it should be done. We could debate whether there are jobs out there to be had or whether there aren't. But let's just let those facts sit there and ask the question, why did people go there so often to that location to find an answer for their financial struggle instead of, en masse, coming to the church and asking for a solution to their struggle there? Here's what I'm getting at, friends. The church, Christian people, are uniquely positioned to provide charity in a way that no other organization, no secular organization, no government entity ever could. Because the church can connect charity to the gospel. Not charity for charity's sake, but charity that exists to say, I do this for you because Jesus did this for me and you. And so, friends, what's scary is that behind all of those comments on the news article, behind those feelings, and behind all of those searches where people search that instead of searching out a church to find comfort, peace, and support, behind all of that, yes, there's a negative opinion of the church as organization, and that's a bad thing for our world. But the scary thing about it is, when the church doesn't have opportunity or doesn't take opportunity to show charity the way God told us to, then people don't see Jesus the way that he told us to do it here, by giving them a cup of cold water in his name, by giving them clothing and shoes and all the things that he lists in this verse. And so even though Spirit of Life is that charitable church, even though Spirit of Life has time and again shown that it loves its community and that it attaches that message to the gospel, your pastor and you look at those verses and we kind of marvel at it the same way that the believers did when they heard it. Well, I didn't do any of those things, Jesus. I certainly didn't live up to the task that you sent me. And so as I confess that and as you confess that, the cool thing that we see in this lesson is that there is one guy who did it perfectly all the time. One person who was always charitable, who did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but instead took the nature of a servant and gave himself for us all. I want to look at these words, and I want to put them in a different light, friends. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. You might remember Jesus sitting with the woman at the well. And the woman at the well sure got water that day, but she got far more than that. Jesus says, I'm going to give you this water, but you need to drink of me, because when you drink of me, you will never be thirsty again. I want to look at the rest of the words where Jesus says, I was a stranger, and you invited me in. You think of all the times that Jesus showed up for people that needed him at the exact right time, how he shows up for Mary and Martha and raises Lazarus from the dead, how he shows up for Jairus and his daughter and raises her from the dead, how he shows up to heal people, shows up with food at the exact right time, and every single time attaches it to the gospel message. Friends, check it out. The greatest charity that Jesus has ever showed to you and me. Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. Let me ask you a question. Who was it that was set to inherit heaven? Whose name was on those golden streets? Whose name was on the deed to those heavenly mansions? It was not us. It was Jesus Christ. And yet before time began, before you and I even messed up once, Jesus decided to write his name off of that deed and hand it to you. Before time began, Jesus decided to say, those mansions, those rooms are prepared in advance for God's people to show you the greatest charity of all, not charity for charity's sake, but charity to show you grace, mercy, and love that was undeserved so that you could have heaven for eternity. And so now that you've seen that gift, and so now that you know and have experienced in the Word the forgiveness and charity that Jesus Christ shows to us, now the words that we shared from Zacchaeus last week, where he saw the compassion of Jesus, now those words become our words. You remember Zacchaeus standing before Jesus, and he says, wow, look at the compassion you've shown me, Jesus. And he says, look, now I give 4 times away what I stole to the people. I give it all away because I want them to see you. Now those words become our words, friends. And so we raise our hand as we have every single week during the sermon series, and we ask the question, because I know what Jesus has done for me. Now I want to know from the Word, how do I become an even more charitable Christian? How do I become an even more charitable church so that people can see Jesus? And you see that the answer is right here. The response of the church to Jesus. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you. You see, they did those good things without even realizing that they did it. Because they saw Jesus and they stared at his charity, that changed them so much that they just acted in charity with the community, and it was just something natural that they became because Jesus made them that way in faith. So when you ask the question, how do I become a more charitable person so that people see Jesus? How do we become a more charitable church so that people see Jesus? The answer is just that you stare at him and you see what he has done for you. It didn't take for those Christians a Dave Ramsey lesson with 10 steps to plan out their generosity. They could have done that. It didn't take them sitting down and mapping out everything that they would do. It was simply what they became in Jesus' blood and resurrection. And the charity and gospel came in tow with the faith that was created in them. And so here's how it's going to show up for us, friends, now that we have seen, and now that we have seen the grace of Jesus. Now, that budget line that talks to us about giving to the needy in our community, now that is no longer something that's buried on the bottom of a budget sheet that just kind of gets inserted in there, and maybe we spend it, maybe we don't. But now it becomes something that we plan, that we put at the top, and we say, wow, this is really important to us because we want people to see Jesus. Now we become Christians who say, what people who are unlike me can I let into my home and into my church and share my earthly blessings and say to them, I want you to see Jesus in me. Now, instead of encouraging people to pursue every social safety net that is outside of us in the first place, now the church shares the greatest safety net that Jesus has given us. A safety net, yes, of physical things, but a safety net for eternity that God has put only into the hands of his church and his people. Friends, today after church, every single one of us is going to receive a little envelope. And here's what's inside of those envelopes. They're called planned acts of kindness. They're not even random. We do it because we saw Jesus, and now we want to share in a planned way. And so inside of these envelopes, there's a different act of kindness that you're going to take out into your community. And there's also an invitation that says, I've got good news about Jesus at Spirit of Life. Come join me. And you're going to take that into your community, and you're going to bluntly say, I did this for you because I want you to see Jesus through me. Friends, people come to me all the time and they say that we are a greedy nation. They say that we are consumed with consumerism and all that glitters and is gold. And they're right. That is us sometimes. But because of Jesus, we get to flip that script. Because of what Jesus has done and his great charity on the cross and in the empty tomb, the great charity that he shared with us, now we stop at nothing to give good news to others. Now we give everything we have in every venue of our lives so that other people can see Jesus. My friend and member of our church, Paul Kurth, said it to me once this way. He said, what does a soul cost, Pastor? How much is a soul worth? Friends, I'm willing to give anything. That has nothing to do with giving to the church. It has to do with sharing with the people in our community that are around us that are hurting in a dark and scary time. Let's give of ourselves, our time, our talents, and our treasures so that other people can see Jesus and at the end of time walk with us into that inheritance prepared in advance. Amen.